Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by Old School Lane, producing various content from blogs, videos, and podcasts discussing about movies, TV shows, video games, and everything else in between since 2011. You can check out the podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, Overcast, Breaker, Pocket Cast, and YouTube. We're associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, The Comic Book Cast, and The Arun Mehta Show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Casual Chats. I am Patricia, and I am here with these two wonderful special guests discussing about their newest short film, Affairs of the Arts, which is the fourth out of the Beryl Quintology, I guess we can call it. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I am here with writer Les Mills and animator and director Joanna Quinn. So welcome very much and just thank you so much for taking the time for being in this podcast.
Oh, well, thank you very much for asking us.
So I must ask you for the both of you. So where did you get your inspirations and your influences for writing and for animation?
Ooh, big question, big question.
I suppose we're both observers, of people. So we love observation and people.
Well, we both come from art backgrounds. We both went to art college. I studied fine art, and Joanna studied graphic design. And in fact, I actually taught Joanna drawing when she was in technical college. So that's sort of how we met up originally. And then I taught in the college she graduated from in Middlesex in London as well. So that's just how we got together. And want to add anything to that? You were entranced by my answer.
I was taken back.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on. I've forgotten what the question was. I went back in time. I was walking down that road.
No, please continue that road. I'd love to know. So were there any animated movies or shows that you grew up with that influenced your art, or maybe any artists that influenced you?
Well, I was an only child until my dad remarried, and I've got two half brothers now. But so I spent a lot of time alone and drawing. And so in the film, there's a shot of Beryl drawing on her bedroom wall. And that was actually me, so my bedroom walls were covered with drawings. And very liberal parents. And I remember watching cartoons on television like Tom and Jerry and those sorts of cartoons, but it's always been a very distant world. That's something else, I never, because it was American as well, so it was another world that I wasn't part of. And I suppose I thought that all the way through, that was another world that I wasn't part of. Even when I was doing animation, I was still thinking that's another world that I'm not part of. I'm just doing what I do. So I've always come from a drawing point of view rather than an animation. I've always enjoyed drawing. So I wasn't sort of inspired by any animators at a young age. But my mother bought me, because they could see that I was obsessed with drawing. My mum bought me a what do you call it? A blackboard with chalks. And so I would draw, and I would always draw what I saw. So even from an early age, I'm talking about 6, I was drawing what I could see out of the window. And so it was all observational. And of course, because it was a chalkboard, I had to rub everything out and start again. So maybe at that point, I started not being precious about my drawings, and so it was the idea of repetition gets it started at an early age, you know. Yeah, so I think I fell into animation because it required endless drawings and storytelling, which are two things that I love. So that's how I started with animation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when it comes to art, now I'm not an artist myself, but I do know a few artists, especially since I am a college student and my major is broadcast journalism. So I see a lot of artists and photographers, and whenever they do storyboarding classes or whenever they're doing any sort of artistic paintings, I do definitely see a type of repetition because here's the thing that some people always seem to say when it comes to that is that repetition is key so that you can be able to get down the basics. And it may seem boring for a lot of people who are starting off, but it is very crucial, especially since you're going to be doing that as well as getting some new skills into your repertoire. So I would say, I guess we'll even go to this for anybody who wants to get into writing or who wants to get into art. If for any of our listeners out there who want to get into that field or into that career, what advice would you give them?
You are right about repetition, and
especially in animation.
Especially in animation. But I think whatever you do, it's all about hard work. You know, it's all about working, reworking, improving, and not taking the first thing that comes into your head, and being prepared to refine, which is sort of repetition, but it's slightly different each time. But I do think you have to be very committed. You know, it's not easy. It's easy to come up with an original idea, and
thank you.
All right, it's not easy to come. I mean, it's easy to come up with an idea, but it takes a lot of hard work to get it on the screen or get it into a book or something. You know, it's just graft, and you have to be very committed to doing that. So,
well, in animation particularly, because it's a lot of repetition, you've got to develop movement in stages, and the process is quite involving and tedious, actually.
yeah.
You know, the actual process of photographing one image at a time to create a bit of movement is you have to have a certain mentality to be able to stick with that, you know. And,
yeah,
you know, it's quite easy to be a painter or to draw from life or whatever, because it's one off. But when you're making an animated film, you know, it takes a long time, and it's repetitious, and it's very involving in that way.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the things I've learned as well, because I've done a lot of directing, so directing other animators, is because it is all about perfect. I'm striving for perfection all of the time, and I've got an idea in my head what I want to achieve. And when you're working with people, your idea of what you want and their idea is usually completely different. And so working with somebody, just because they've done what you've asked, you say, I want you to move that from there to there. So they go, done it. And then you look at it and you go, no, that's not right. What I want you to do is to move it from there to there, but do this in the middle, or it just lacks something. And so it's all about taking the basics and then reworking it until it's absolutely spot on. And that's sometimes very difficult for animators who can't see what you're trying to achieve, you know, so they think they've done what you've asked, but it's hard sometimes for them to understand what it is you're absolutely trying to get at. And so that's why it's very important to work with people who you can enjoy their company, you know, and be able to communicate with, so that they'll have faith in your decisions, you know, so they can go, okay, I'll do what she says, even though I think she's wrong. And then they'll do it and go, oh yeah, you're right, that's much better. So so it is all about pushing people until they're almost gonna go, that's it, I give up. It's a long and hard process.
Absolutely. I think it is a long and hard process, but I would say that the journey would be well worth it because you get to see your final product. And then when
Yeah.
everybody is like so awed with what you're able to create, that's when you realize that all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into it is like, ah, this is why
Yeah.
I do what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. I mean, when we first finished the film, you never know whether it's good or bad. You know, you're so close to it, you can't tell whether you just don't know. And so we spent 6 years making it, and then as soon as we finished it, we thought, no, it's no good. And then it was started to get into festivals and things. So now it's been nominated for a BAFTA and an Oscar. It's like, those 6 years were worth it. And not just for us, for the team that worked on it as well, because animation is a team job. So we all worked so hard, and so it does feel like it was worth it.
Yes. I will get to the short film in just a moment, but I want to talk about the other three that led up to Affairs of the Arts. So let's talk about the first one, which was Girls' Night Out back in 1987. And I want to start talking about the character of Beryl herself, where she went through a long transitional period where she was like a very rambunctious girl to somebody who is like gradually more and more that she wants to prove herself, and she becomes more obsessed. And I just was curious that how did you transition the character from where she started to where she is now?
And actually, what you've just described is me.
Ah,
I started off like Beryl, going, yeah, and then getting more more thoughtful and anxious, and yeah, I mean, but the Girls' Night Out was my graduation film. And it really was just, and as Les has said, our first 3 films were really just based on one experience. So Girls' Night Out was about the experience of going to see a male stripper, and then Body Beautiful, the following film, was about a bodybuilding contest
in a factory,
which Beryl wins, but brings in other things about sexism in the workplace and stuff like that. And then the third film was about a wedding and Beryl filming a wedding. So that they're all events, but this last film was actually lots of different things. It's quite different actually to the other. The structure is quite different because it's more about character. But and I suppose the evolution, it's just become more complex because people really like the character Beryl, say, oh, when can we see another Beryl film? And so each time we've got to try and make it more interesting and more, because we can't really do a single event film again and expect the same reaction that I got with Girls' Night Out, because it was new and it was fresh. It wouldn't work now. So and Beryl's much older. Well, she's not, she's still the same, but we're much older. So we're just trying to make her character more complex and more interesting, because it makes it more interesting for us to make and for the audiences to watch, I think.
Yeah, but there are more characters in this last film who are related specifically to Beryl. I mean, it's a family film, basically. So we're exploring not only Beryl as a family member, but her sister, her son, her husband. In the other films, we didn't really have that intensity of character related to Beryl. Her husband has always been in there, in some way or other. In the first film, he just sat in an armchair basically, right? And that was it. And then in the next film there was more of it, and in this film there's quite a lot because he's Beryl's model, and and connected. He is a major character now, whereas initially he was just a guy sitting in a chair, right? But he's got character now. Yeah. And so inventing her sister Beverly was great, to actually investigate new characters and relate them in a kind of family way. That was one of the tough jobs of the film.
I think as well, earlier on, we were trying to redress the balance in animation, where most of the protagonists in the films were male. And so I was making a real effort to make a strong female character that would, dominate the screen and be and be clearly a woman telling a woman's story, because it was quite a feminist statement, you know, and just to make her the hero of the film a woman. But as time has gone on, you know, I've become more comfortable, I suppose, about being a woman, and so I feel it's time now to explore her husband more and give some of the male characters a little bit more focus, which wouldn't have been appropriate further back, because we really wanted it to be female, and for it to be a female voice all the way through. But now it feels okay to bring more men into it, to give them a voice too. But I still think Beryl and her sister are dominating. You know, they're the two. It's their story, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose life changes and your ideas change, so it filters into the films you make.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering about that, because you were saying that the first three were definitely female-centric, especially with Beryl. Was it because of the particular time period, or personally what you were going through was because of that?
Well, I think the very first film, Girls' Night Out, was a response to the political feelings of the 80s. You know, in Britain we had Margaret Thatcher, who was dreadful, and so there was a lot of everybody was politicized, you know, and so we were always having sit-ins at college, and it all seemed quite normal to be quite political, and feminism as well. You know, there were Spare Rib magazine, you know, so there was all sorts of feminist literature coming out that I was reading, and at the time, because as I said before, I've always drawn, I've always been drawing, I always drew men. You know, I was always drawing men when I was just sitting doodling. It would always be a man. And so at that point I thought, why do I draw men all the time? And it's because of the culture that we live in, you know. And so I thought, no, I'm going to make a real effort to draw women. And that's why Girls' Night Out came out, because I thought I'm going to make an effort just to have an all-women cast, you know, and just draw women. And of course, when I started to draw women, I think when you draw men, when I draw a man, it's a generic thing. I'm just looking at the form of the male form as I'm drawing. But when I draw a woman, I feel that I need to tell her story. You know, as a woman, I feel more interested in her backstory. And so when I started to do the characters in Girls' Night Out, they all had to have characters. They couldn't just be these women. They all had to be particular characters. And so that sort of started me thinking about telling stories from a woman's point of view, and how important it is as a woman, you know, to get women on the screen and hear their stories. So that's, yeah, so it all came out of the 1980s and the feeling of the lack of representation of women on the screen, definitely.
Especially in animation.
Especially in animation.
Because they're mainly male figures, and the people who made cartoons or made animation were predominantly male.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't until, I mean, this was my little world, you know, I was doing this and I was just responding to what was around me. But it wasn't until I went to my first film festival, where Girls' Night Out went, the first, and it was in Annecy in France, and it's the biggest film festival in the world. I didn't know, it could have been tiny for all I knew. You know, I just went there, and that was the first time I'd seen lots of animated films. And I was sitting there watching all these films, and I thought, my God, you know, because people were saying how different my film was, and until you're able to compare it with other films, you don't know what they're talking about, you know. And so when I saw these other films, I got it, you know, and I thought, okay, this is actually my little college film is actually quite a bold statement about women, you know, in this very male world. I didn't realize it was quite so male, and a lot of the films were quite sexist, but because they're funny, everybody's laughing, and you think, oh, we shouldn't really be laughing at that. You know, so from that point on, I thought, I have a job, you know. I became committed now from that point on to make more films, and more films with strong women characters.
Absolutely.
But the irony is now, Les writes all the scripts from a girl's point of view. He is actually wearing a skirt.
Oh, that's nice. We're a progressive 21st century.
Exactly. It's all fluid.
There you go. So you're going from trying to bring out the sexism of the 80s from Girls Night Out, and then you go over to sexual harassment in a work environment in Body Beautiful, and then I guess in what was it, the third film, I'm sorry, oh yeah, Dreams and Desires, Family Ties. I think that was the seeds that was planted with Beryl being obsessed with something, in this case filming, which would lead up into Affairs of the Arts. And I think that with the seeds planted, I guess that was when you decided to go into Affairs of the Arts, where she's really obsessed with art and where she is now. And I know you were saying earlier that Beryl hasn't exactly aged since you started, but I kind of noticed a little bit of it. Maybe it's just my analytical brain, where I kind of noticed that she does look slightly younger in Girls Night Out, and in Body Beautiful, when Beryl was getting off from work and Eifer was vacuuming, I did see like a picture of a little boy, which I assume is Colin. So I take it it's around the early 90s. And I guess there is a slight difference between Dreams and Desires and with Affairs of the Arts, which probably could have taken place around the same time because they do look similar. So I do see a progression in time on that. And now going into Affairs of the Arts, where you do get to know more of the characters. So what made you decide to go into the direction that you wanted to portray these characters as, like Colin being the obsessed geek who's just really fascinated with taking down train signals and screws and his Yamaha organ, and Beverly with, oh wow, everything from stuffing to Vladimir Lenin. Oh my god. I mean, and then Eifer, being like very supportive but suffering for his art. So where did the evolution of these characters come from?
Well, I guess they're biographical and autobiographical. I mean, Colin is my brother. My brother is older than me, and is the most obsessive person I've ever met in my life. The guy is sort of he's 5 years older than me, and from a very early age, his obsessions dominated the family, in the sense that, it was the first time I'd ever come across somebody who was so devoted to one thing and then another thing, and it progressed throughout his life. He's still exactly the same now. He writes books now, and he's still obsessed with the things that Colin is obsessed with in this film. He was obsessed with, really. So that was a kind of observational closeness that I had growing up with him, which became the character of Colin in the last film. So as Joe said earlier, we're really big on observation. When we go somewhere, we're always commenting on the people who are frequenting that space, both of us, making comments about their character, or it's something that we are obsessed with, looking at people. So the characters come from observation, they come from the closeness in a family situation. What was the question?
I was just thinking of something then. I was walking up that road again. No, I wasn't. I was just thinking that this thing about observation. One of the artists who I really love is a woman called Posey Simmons, and she does comic strips, and she used to do a comic strip in a big paper in the Guardian newspaper in Britain. But her observation is wonderful. She focuses in on people she knows, like very middle class literary people. Anyway, once we were invited to this very glitzy do. It was just after Princess Diana died, and the Queen was trying to be nice to the arts. So there was a big do organized, and everybody was there, and Posey Simmons was there. Now I knew Posey anyway, and I went up to her because we were all on our own, and this room was like full of film people, people from, you know, the fine arts, you know, everybody. And we were chatting, and she said, look around, look at their shoes, you know. And I thought, this is it, you know. She wasn't looking at, she was looking at their shoes, and she was looking at their bags, and she was looking at, you know, it was all about observation. And you could see her taking mental notes for her next comic strip. And I think that's what we all do, you know, people who are obsessed with observation for telling stories. You're picking up not the obvious, but the details, you know, the shoes, the back, look at the nail polish, you know. It's all like the little extras that give you information about that character. Sorry, that was an aside.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
What the question was there too. Yeah?
Yeah, sorry, what was the question? Sorry, we've been in lockdown for 2 years. We're like got verbal diarrhea. Sorry.
It's okay. I enjoy verbal diarrhea. I've been doing a podcast for almost 10 years. I live for this. I was talking about the character.
The observation feeds everything. It feeds the stories, the narrative, the characters especially. You know, there's a closeness. I mean, when you base a whole film on your own family, in a sense, you know, it's quite easy because you've had a lifetime's experience of them. You know every detail about what they do, what their obsessions are. So you can write very, very clearly about that, and they can become characters in something else. And basically, that's what's happened in this film.
Yes, I was talking about the influences for the characters. You were saying earlier about that Colin was influenced by your brother, but as for Beverly and Iver, who were their influences by?
Well, Iver, I think, was probably an archetype, really, wasn't it?
Yeah,
sort of like, you know, we talk about male dominance in families and things like that. And in Wales, do you live in Wales? Where are you? Sorry,
Oh, she doesn't live in Wales. She's in New York.
Oh, sorry. No,
I live in America. Yes.
Yes.
What part of America do you live in?
Well, I currently live in Alabama because I'm going to school, but I previously lived in Florida. But I was born and raised in New York, so that's where
I did my MA in Rutgers College in New Jersey, and then I lived in New York for 4 years after that. So,
nice.
You know, I had experience of all that, and it was a great experience for me in terms of observation. What we're talking about now, it was amazing.
Iver.
Yeah, Iver. I think you know, the male dominance in families is traditional and exists everywhere, but in Wales it was particularly. The men went out to work, the women stayed at home. And Iver, Beryl's husband, is the opposite of that in a sense. He's the lesser of the in terms of character of the family. It's Beryl that dominates the family, and Iver helps her in her quest to express herself, basically. So it reverses the traditional roles that are always existed in Wales, but in every other country, male dominance is there. So we kind of, it was easy to do that.
Yeah, so he's less of an existing person that we know. He's just more of a figure, you know. He represents a typical male husband or
but he's not
father.
a typical one, because he doesn't do a lot of the things that most blokes do in relationships, which is dominate things. Or he plays second fiddle to Beryl in most things, and he helps her achieve what she wants to do, and he supports her in a kind of, not in a docile way, but he's quite a supportive character. And of course, in this last film, he's the model, so he's like helping her intrinsically to create and draw.
And what about Beverly? Where's she from?
Well, Beverly is totally invented. You know, Beverly, she's the sister of Beryl. I just invented her as a character, and to make it more interesting and to follow her obsessions, she ends up in the States. Obviously, you know, you've seen the film, right? I think
yeah. Beverly is probably the opposite of Beryl. You know, so whatever Beryl isn't, Beverly is. So maybe that's how we formed her character. And yeah.
I'm having lived in the States, it was easy for me to transfer her character from Britain, from Wales, into the States. She's very ambitious, and she marries somebody and then throws him away after almost like the time of the wedding, because she's very thrusting, very go ahead. She's very American in that kind of entrepreneurial sense, and I suppose that her character was informed by my experience of living in America for 6 years, so she's a totally different character to Beryl in that sense, and she sometimes dominates Beryl's thinking in this last film. Beryl admires her sister for all the things that she's achieved and what she's actually doing, which in some instances is quite weird. I mean, she's still got that very American kind of going for it position, which is uncharacteristic of Beryl in many ways. Only now and then Beryl demonstrates that too. So it ends up as a familial thing to do with people in a family suddenly realizing their potential and going for it. And Beryl does that in all the films. Does that answer the question?
No.
Yes, it does.
Well, I'm just trying to say where the characters
Right.
come from. Sometimes they're based on very close observation of somebody very close to me. My brother is Colin, the son, and Beverly isn't. Beverly is an invented character based on experiences I've had, based on a lot of different things. So there are two different ways of getting the definition of a character.
And Beryl is a mixture of my mother and somebody who used to work at the college that I went to when I invented Beryl. So she sort of exists in different people,
Right,
or from different people.
yes. Now, going into skipping over from the writing portion to the animation portion, where I'm sure that a lot of things have changed from when you were starting to draw with traditional pen and paper, and then going over to transitioning to computers. So was that like a natural transition for you, or did it did it take some time to get used to?
Well, because we did commercials for the States, we did the Charmin commercial for a long time, 10 years, 13 years, something like that. And during that period, that's when it sort of changed, and so we went from technology changed. Yeah. But of course, we had to keep the original style, which was drawn. So we had to use computers in such a way that everything still looked the same, so we ended up still drawing on paper, scanning it into the computer, using the computer for all of the things that you can use the computer for, but the original drawings were always done on paper. When we did this last film, Affairs of the Art, what I wanted to do was do it entirely digitally using a Cintiq and TV Paint software, which enables you to draw into the computer on a tablet, so you do it directly.
So you abandoned paper, basically.
I abandoned paper, pencils, and I started to animate. Well, I did it for 6 months, animated digitally, but it didn't work. And it just uses a different bit of your brain, because you have to make decisions all the time about things that you don't have to make decisions about when you're drawing with paper, a pencil. It's much more intuitive for me because I'm used to it. So I abandoned the Cintiq and I went back to drawing on paper. So Affairs of the Art is all drawn on paper, scanned into the computer and colored on TV Paint. But before we do the coloring digitally, Les does color setups for every single scene with Caran d'Ache on paper.
Yeah.
So we know what we're trying to achieve. When we're working digitally, we're always trying to get it to look hand-drawn, so it's got that organic feel. So always looking and referencing all the time, avoiding going into the shiny digital world, trying to keep it hand-drawn and and grounded. So into TV Paint, colored, and then composited in After Effects. So I think, to sum up, we wanted to combine the
best of both
best of both worlds, and it was great because we were experimenting as we were going along, trying to work out how the hell to make it look hand drawn all the way through, and how to avoid it looking shiny, because it's very hard to stop it looking shiny and clean. You know,
that's a thing that a lot of people are very I would say, how would I put this? There's a lot of people who, when they look at a particular art style in an animated film, or in general, when they're saying about like, it needs to be clean and it needs to be put together. But I think the roughness of something like a cartoon or an animated film gives its authenticity, which I think a lot of people can really appreciate, because it took a lot of time into it. Where something as clean, some people kind of describe it as sterile, like it looked like it was just like pre-made, and it doesn't have its own. Yes.
We were being interviewed by Alison Snowden and David Fine, and David said it's because both of them went to they live in Canada, but both of them went to the National Film School in London. And I think that's where they met. But they were with Nick Park. And he said, because they're really good friends with Nick still, he said the thing that he loves about plasticine as opposed to 3D animation is that you can see a thumbprint. When you model clay, you can see literally the hand of the person who's made the model. And there's something really special about that. And he said it's the same with drawing. With our work, you can see our hands smudges on it, and that's what we want to try and keep to make it.
It's very physical.
Yes, it's very physical. Yeah,
and it's very alive in a way that. I mean, that's not to say that we don't want to. When there's some brilliant, there's a lot of very, very brilliant computer animation and state-of-the-art technology animation, but as a natural process
for us,
for Joanna especially, that's where she's very relaxed and very happy and very expressive. So that's why she abandoned the tablet. I could see, I could see in the animation was getting very kind of lifeless and dead and sterile. And I said, you're not very happy doing that. Well, she was telling me she wasn't very happy anyway. I said, well, we've tried it out. We've wasted a bit of money on the technology. Just go back to what you're totally happy with. And she did. She went back to it.
I mean, I love the technology, and it was great fun me doing it, but I did spend more time on the users forum asking questions and waiting for answers. The forum was great. Met so many friends, so I was like chatting all the time.
Because nowadays young animators, they don't usually work on paper and pencil. They might do some,
I mean, our team was very young, so we worked with lots of fresh graduates, and of course for them the digital world was totally normal, and it was really weird working on paper. So it's the opposite. They're used to digital and I'm used to paper, so it's just what you're comfortable with using.
Absolutely. So I guess we can wrap things up. So I just want to give a major congratulations for both your BAFTA and your Oscar nomination.
Thank you.
Somebody was actually pointing out on Twitter saying that it's amazing to see a woman director being nominated for an Oscar when it's, even to this day in 2020, still very male dominant. So yes, I just want to. Yeah, I just want to give you my wholehearted congratulations.
Yes, I saw that 13 of there are 13 directors in the animation category, in the the feature and the short film, and I'm the only woman.
Yes.
In this time, it's not good.
Yes, even with Girls' Night Out, you were still saying the same thing even back then.
No, but it made sense then. Now it doesn't make sense.
By the way, it's very good. It's very good to know that you know the films.
Yeah,
you watched all the films and you can quote.
Thank you so much.
Because that's great. That's absolutely great.
Thank you. So I just want to say one more thing. So what's next for Beryl?
Oh, well,
Oh.
she's just having a great time. She's whizzing around with her frocks and going to all these festivals.
Nice.
Especially in lockdown when we were stuck here, she was sending us postcards. So yeah, she's trying to slim down at the moment to get into her Oscar frock and her BAFTA frock.
Well, with all this quarantine that's been happening, if she can't, that is very understandable.
It's actually, the quarantine is brilliant for animators because they're these lone fingers.
Yeah, animation has boomed.
You know,
Yes.
we're always stuck on a light box or stuck, you know, drawing. And so it's not that different, but what's different is the geography. You can't go anywhere. So, because we've only been to 5 festivals.
Yeah.
Normally we'd have been to 60 in that year.
Oh, not quite.
Well, a lot of festivals, you know.
A lot.
Either looking at the work or being on the juries or whatever. The COVID has sort of stopped that, but it's enabled things like this to go on. Like
Loads of online stuff.
We've met so many people.
Yeah, it's been terrific. It has open borders a bit.
It's
and
great.
Made it more accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, what's your next project?
Oh God, I think something really short.
We're not working on a project at the moment. We're just working on promoting the film and enjoying the film and where it's traveling. So literally, we are thinking 10 minutes ahead.
We've got a theme though, and it's anxiety.
Anxiety.
We've got a theme to focus on.
And I am doing a little bit of animation, but it's very simple, and I'm just enjoying the drawing. So I think after making a big film for 6 years with a lot of story and a lot of, you know, quite complex, just doing a little bit of drawing with lines flying around is just nice.
Yeah. Well, I cannot wait for your next Beryl film to come out in 2037. I noticed.
I'll put it in the diary.
I just thought it was like an interesting coincidence. It's like, you know, from Girls' Night Out to Dreams and Desires took 15 years, and from Dreams and Desires to Affairs of the Arts took 15 years. So I just thought 2037.
Yeah, I won't be able to hold a pencil by then.
Yeah, remember though, the time gap between the last film and this film was taken up by, we did a huge amount of ads, you know, for the States and Canada, and that was constructive in the sense that we made money, and the money made this film. Most of it is made by money from charming toilet paper ads. But we earned. No, really. I mean,
toilet paper.
And we did other ads too. So.
I'm surprised that you didn't use Charmin as like a sponsor when Beryl was like doing like doodling on a toilet paper, and it's like the softness of Charmin is able to do this wonderful art.
Damn, what a wasted opportunity.
It's still running, isn't it? The Charmin toilet paper.
Yeah.
You know of it.
Oh, not the ads.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
The ads have stopped, have they?
I think so.
Oh.
Well, I just want to thank you guys so much for coming into this podcast. This has been wonderful. So thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Well, thank you. Lovely to meet you finally.
Yes. So please, why don't you guys plug and promote your stuff? Where people can find you at and where people can watch your film.
Well, if you go onto our website, which is www.berylproductions.co.uk, you can find all of our films and all of the news. I try and keep the news page up. And the film is available in America on the New Yorker site. Which I can't give you because I don't know what it is, but it's there. They've got a showcase, so it's online free to view in America and Canada, and it's also part of Shorts International nominees touring program, and so very soon there's going to be a touring program in all the cinemas of the short film nominees, animation, live action, and documentary. And so we'll put all of that news on our website when it becomes available.
All right. And as for me, you can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/oldsschoollane. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/oldsschoollane. I'm on Twitter at Patty_B_Miranda. You can check out my podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, many
My
places.
God, you're a busy woman.
Well, luckily Anchor is able to distribute all of those much easier. So I just use one source and then they do the distribution for me. So it saves me a lot of time.
What city are you based in?
I live in Alabama, but that's because I'm going to school over there. But I lived in Florida for over 20 years. So
Right.
yeah.
A Florida girl.
So
Yes, more or less.
You're still studying now then, right?
Yes, I'm in my senior year.
Oh, right.
Good luck with it all.
Good.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I just finished
I
taking
had
my.
I had a great experience studying in the States, in Rutgers, in New Jersey. That was fantastic. You know,
Yes,
so close to New York and everything. It was brilliant.
wonderful.
Opened my mind.
Yes, it definitely, especially when going into a different country and seeing what kind of education that they do compared to your upbringing and their education, it definitely does give you an interesting perspective for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Let us know in the comments below if you have seen Affairs of the Arts or any of the other Beryl films. What did you think of it? And please give us your feedback on what you guys would like to see next for Joanna and Les. So thank you so much for listening. Hope to see you around soon and take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.